This past week, I put out a poll on my community tab asking what people wanted most when it came to NASCAR, what they could change or what not. And over 13,000 of you voted, with 2% saying other of the main three I put on there, 11% putting 43 cars, 31% wanting high horsepower, and 56% of you wanting a different championship format. And I want to look at the reasoning you guys give because I think there are a lot of good ones in there. So let's kick it off. Delta Tag on here said, well, how about all the above? And you know what? I get it. I would like all the above as well, personally. Definitely the championship format changed. High horsepower, especially at the short tracks, would be good. And you know what? I know it's nostalgia, but 43 car fields would be really nice, especially if we get an OEM in there. So yeah, I get that. But there's a reason why I made sure that you had to choose one, because it's fun making you all squirm a little bit on what you have to choose between things you like. Timberwolf for 63 says, I'd rather have a championship format where consistency matters more than anything. And I think this is one where you see the big split with NASCAR fans. Some wanting winning to be the only thing that matters, similar to Steve Letarte and his kind of crazy idea of having wins be the only thing that matters, and others who are more old school as well that would rather it just be you're good the entire season and the aggregate helps figure out who was the best. Now, there are, even in the replies to this, many that refute or support it. For instance, MTJ getting in the playoffs despite not finishing at Darlington, meaning consistency over the regular season did matter. That cannot be overlooked, as consistency is at least a little more valued than it was, say, in 2014 to 2016 under this system. But at the same time, as others say, you do have Joey Logano winning the championship, and he certainly was not good all year, or I would even say wasn't even good for a plurality of the year, if anything else. So there is, I think, a give and take on that. I don't think you can go completely back to the way it was, but I do think that getting more in the middle on things will make a lot more fans happy over time. Tanker 335 says the current management team run out of town before they can do any more damage. And this is something I'm seeing a lot more people really gravitate towards as a reason. After all, we are now about 6-7 years into the post-Brian France era, where he had to step down, and now that Jim France and the Steves are the ones who are the figureheads in charge, we've not really seen much change necessarily for the better in the eyes of many fans. And while the high of not having Brian France has certainly worn down, there is no love lost between current management as well as the fans. I will point out, though, this is a consistent thing in every sport, from the NBA to the MLB to even the NFL. And when you look at the racing side of things, it is not much better. Just look at the drama we've had with IndyCar over the last year. The Black Mamba 248 says, never thought much about it, but 43 cars just makes sense. And I think so too. Granted, it was not that way forever. Even in the 90s, there were shorter fields at different tracks, and we've really only had 43 car fields be the regular since NASCAR really hit its heyday in the 90s and 2000s into the 2010s. But it does feel right, especially for a lot of us that are very nostalgic. And if you're having 43 competitive cars out there, so say another OEM comes in, you have 40 charters that are mostly competitive, and then the 3 open cars now are almost always competitive. A competitive 43 car field, rather than one that has a lot of start and parks or guys 10 miles an hour off the pace, actually probably would be better for the sport, and it would probably clear up a lot of the backlog we see in the lower series when it comes to young drivers not being able to get a ride in the Cup Series. Now, Zoomwise here says high horsepower. I think making the racing better should be the number one goal. Now, it's not necessarily a guarantee that higher horsepower would make racing better. A lot of people would argue that restrictor plate racing, like we see at Daytona, Talladega, and now Atlanta, has made the racing there better. But I do think that it generally coincides with that. When you look at a lot of the intermediate tracks at times, and especially road courses and short tracks, higher horsepower and more difficulty to control makes the racing better. And I think that overall, his statement that making racing better should be the number one goal is 100% factual. The racing is what brings people in. They don't care about the championship the first time they watch a race. They don't care about production value the first time they watch a race. They don't care about the atmosphere at the track when they're watching a race for the first time on TV. It is a racing that brings people in. It's a racing that brought me in, and I guarantee it's a racing that brought so many of you in. Sisman brings in some other points here. We had some really awesome racing in 2024. Of course, short tracks and possibly road courses will still need work, but in general, I don't think there's much to complain about. What really stands out in a negative way is how NASCAR determines a champion. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth when you see someone averaging a 17th place finish across 36 races at very different tracks suddenly bringing championship home. I mean, I'm surprised that some people are still okay with it. I like Logano, but that's not how you should win a championship after battling 35 drivers across 36 race weekends. There was more a good point in the chase for the Cup, and they really had entertainment and a lot of exciting battles, but they were greedy for more and overstepped in a big way. And that's kind of where I think a lot of fans are now. I was not a fan of the chase for the longest time. I wouldn't even say I'm really a fan all that much. It's just that I see that it could have gotten worse, and I would much rather have the 10-race chase where it will almost always still come down to the wire pretty much or be very close, but you still have to have some form of consistency. It's a nice balance between what we have now and what we used to have without going all the way back. Now we start getting into a bit more when it comes to the championship, as that was maybe not the most upvoted when it came to comments, but definitely the most comments from it. And this is from Mr. X2188, who says a new playoff format without a winner-take-all championship is the most important change that needs to happen with NASCAR. After that, we do need to up the horsepower in the cars, especially for the short tracks, by at least 100. Now, I'll say this. When it comes to the championship, I think winner-take-all is not the worst part of it. I do think it's more elimination races and cutoffs and everything like that that cause these stupid things we see, and then a one-race finale, and then winner-take-all. But I do agree that I think it needs to change. And when it comes to the horsepower in the cars, I'm with you on the short tracks. Short tracks need work because it is the bread and butter of stock car racing in America. Hornet Guy 9063 says, I'd like NASCAR to resemble every other high-level racing series in terms of how a champion is chosen. Patman says, except for Daytona and Talladega where it's necessary for safety, NASCAR should never cut the horsepower. Notice that they no longer publish qualifying results as speed, as it would be embarrassing how much slower the cars are now than they were 10 to 15 years ago. And yes, I do think that that's part of the reason that speed is not necessarily pushed as much, but I also think it's because NASCAR has such an ass-backwards qualifying, or at least did last year, that the fastest car didn't win in qualifying either. But I do agree with Daytona and Talladega. I know a lot of people don't like this, but it was due to safety, and when it comes to Atlanta, it's clear it was made solely for entertainment. It's worked out so far, but I do agree. There should not be a cut in horsepower. Make these drivers have to drive the cars even harder than they do now, because that's what we pay to see when we show up or when we watch on TV. And the last comment we'll close out on is NASCAR Fanatics, who says a full season points format. Doesn't have to be the Latford-Winston Cup format, although an updated version that guarantees the winner gets the most points would be nice, but NASCAR needs to get some legitimacy back. And they can start by fixing their biggest problem, the playoffs. So there's a lot to cover here. I do think that the playoffs do delegitimize the sport a lot. I mean, it's just clear by the way that it has not necessarily helped the sport. You see so many diehards upset with it. And now even this offseason, you see some of the most ardent playoff defenders admitting defeat and wanting different changes at this point. And if those who defend it most want huge changes that completely change the format itself in every way, well, then at that point, I think you have to admit it is a failure. Now, I do like the idea of a full season format, but I don't think that's possible. It's why I've been saying we should have the middle ground of a chase. But if they ever went back to it, I would probably do a backflip Carl Edwards style. When it comes, though, to what else you said on there, that a version that guarantees the winner gets the most points, yes. Yes. You want to legitimize wins more? You want wins to matter more? Give more points. At the end of the day, that's what the drivers care about most. And if you make points matter more, say in a 10-race chase or something with a little more consistency at the end of the year, yeah, people will still go for wins, especially if you incentivize it well enough during the race itself and after. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems since 2017 that people really don't look at is that, hey, you know what? Maybe we should award the winner the most points, even if they luck into it. Who cares? But with that, I'm going to pass it on to you. What is the biggest thing that you would want changed with NASCAR or have the biggest problem with? Let me know down in the comments below. And while you're at it, leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to this channel for more great and fun NASCAR content. Thank you so much to all my channel members for your continued support. And until next time, have a good one.